Hi everyone, thank you for joining me, John Khosravi, on this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. It's been a little bit since you've heard from me. You've heard the interviews I've been doing, but an agency update, it's been a little bit. But I've been spending a lot of time making a lot of content. One for the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox monthly program, as well as video programs on the Facebook page and on the YouTube page, where I'm discussing a lot of immigration updates and topics and interviews, and just a lot of fun stuff. So if you haven't already, please join the YouTube page for Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, mixing up with my law firm, and Immigration Lawyers Toolbox and the website, and you'll get more information there. A lot of good stuff. If you're interested in some of the training programs, just send me an email at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. But I guess with that, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. All right, so there's a lot of stuff that's piled up, and this is an update episode covering agency and court updates from March to April 2019. In my notes, I say 2019. In my notes, I mistakenly say 2018. Orally, I say 2019, but in actuality, it's 2020. So this is right in the heart of the coronavirus breakdown that happened. And so, I'm a little late. It's already late May right now, but I wanted to get into these issues really quick because it's really important for practitioners to be aware of this stuff. And there's a lot of messed up stuff I've been seeing in decisions for colleagues' cases that I want to talk about. For example, there was a denial of a colleague's case because they sent in the identity documents of the applicant in black and white, and they denied it, saying it has to be in color. Crazy stuff. Another colleague who was doing adjustment of status after a person had been here on the U.S. on a non-immigrant visa, work visa, which extended several times. And in the application, they submitted the first NIV approval notice and the most recent I-94, but not the ones in the middle, and it got denied without an RFE. He was able to get it reopened and fixed within the field office, but you got to be prepared. It's just, sometimes you want to save money, ink costs, just do color ink. Sometimes just print all the I-94s. Just do everything to avoid this, because although these are correctable, it takes so much time and it's just such a headache and it's so frustrating that you just want to just prepare for it beforehand and just not have to deal with it. There's also reports of RFEs coming in on O's and P's because of canceled itineraries due to the coronavirus. So you got to be on your toes. I just got an I-130 RFE that asks for everything that we already gave them. And the couple is no children, recently married, first marriage. We also want divorce certificates, and we also want the children's birth certificates. So the officer just took a boilerplate RFE and just sent it to us. And it's really frustrating because all of a sudden we got to spend a couple of hours responding to that again for no reason. So this kind of stuff is really obnoxious. On the bright side, we're hearing about cases being approved, adjustment cases being approved without interviews. Obviously, employment-based, back in the day, there was no need for interviews for most cases. So those are being approved. But I'm hearing that some people are getting marriage cases approved too. So that's interesting that they would approve marriage cases. Maybe K-1 fiancé visas I would understand, but people are saying, just CR1 kind of marriages are being approved. So that's interesting. On the downside, the Code of Federal Regulations is going to be updated. They put the word out that they want to update the I-864 affidavit of support to make it a requirement. And this is crazy. I'm sure they're going to sue on this. One, for the sponsor to get a notarized I-864 has to be signed in front of a notary. And worse, they have to include all their banking account information and credit card information, all their financial documents and numbers with the application, which is a serious headache. It's going to dissuade a lot of joint sponsors from sponsoring, which is probably what their intent is in the first place. So it's just it's so nasty. I'm sure they're going to sue on that because it's so frivolous. It's not in the statute and previous regulations. It's not needed. If someone has, they're making W-2 income, just call it a day. How often are they have proof? You got to have documented proof of it being an issue for the affidavit of support that they would need to change something like that. Now, one thing that happened when the coronavirus was going hard in March, I think it was, there was thought that the Vermont Service Center had been closed down for a day or two to clean it up. It's not clear exactly what happened, but that's opened up and is accepting cases as normal. Another thing that's been happening USCIS wise, I've been seeing more and more is if you had a client who had started an immigration adjustment case, like a marriage case, but then that case was withdrawn, or they just say withdrawn, or just like divorced and they let it go, during the second interview for a new marriage, so I'm sorry, so let's back it up. So yeah, you get married, file a case, withdraw it. Years later, remarry like U.S. person, like U.S. citizen, apply for adjustment. You get the adjustment approved the second time, so no problem. You get the removal of conditions approved, no problem. You may even do an I-90, no problem. Eventually, you go to citizenship, they'll say, oh, that was fraud on that first application that was withdrawn. And by that time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years have passed, you don't have documentation together. It's a really nasty thing to do after 2 or 3 times they've had a chance to review it and make a fraud accusation, to not do it, to just then bring it up later at a time like naturalization. So nasty that they're doing stuff like that. So unnecessary too. Let's see what else. Biometrics. That's we're seeing EADs being approved without biometrics, so that's a nice thing. And also there was an RFE NOID extension period they started. I'm not sure when that ends, but I remember it started March 1st, maybe June 1st or something like that. You have to check on that, but they're extending that RFE time period because they know people have a hard time getting their documents together. Now, Form I-944, wow, what a headache. I started submitting those, what is it called, Declaration of Self-Sufficiency, Form I-944. Adds so much time to the processing. So it's a totality of the circumstances, situation you got to deal with in analyzing whether the foreign applicant is going to be a public charge. But to be safe, I'm having my clients get health insurance. And health insurance is a headache because they want a statement that shows when it starts and when it ends. They can't just go by the card that you get for health insurance. And most of the time, there's no exact statement that says starts and ends. So they're like, contact the health insurance company, have them write a letter. Which is, I don't know sure if they do that, or if they do, it's going to be a huge headache. That's unnecessary. And then there's English language equivalency need approved, degree equivalency. So we have a case, people got their degree in Canada at a good university too, but we just got the degree, so it's extra costs. Credit reports, which is a big hassle. I try to get them to have a credit report from their home country which shows it's clear, and then also make a request in the U.S. Now the problem is that people don't have a social security number, so how are they going to do an annual credit report, the free report, because the website won't let you move forward. So there's a sheet that they have where you could mail it in. So you mail in that sheet, and what you get in response most of the time is a letter that says you need to have a social security number and 2 like utility bills or mail in your name to show it's really you before you can give it. And so I'm going to be sending that with the application in to say, listen, we tried to get the credit report or just show at least that doesn't exist, and this is what they sent us. Just let it go, blah, blah, blah. Some people are sending personal affidavits from the applicant stating that that's the case. But all this takes extra time to do if you're going to bother getting health insurance, degree equivalencies, credit reports, or letters that there was no degree. So it's such a hassle. On another end, someone had posted in a forum that they had, this is just nasty, they had their I-601A waiver denied. So a 601A waiver denied because the officer thought that the applicant was going to be a public charge. So the public charge analysis is not just coming at the embassy interview stage or at adjustment of status. This is at the I-601 waiver period. I think it was an I-601A. At that point, they're denying for public charge. So just be prepared. Oh, man. Let's see what's next on my notes. Naturalization post-interview absence past 5 years. All right, so sometimes they're looking at, for naturalization, they're looking past the 5-year window that they're supposed to review to see if there's prolonged absences before the 5 years to try to claim abandonment. So they're trying to do everything they can to really hit people really hard. On the bright side, they've extended the Real ID Act requirement to have a real ID, which is a passport or a driver's license that reflects like it's a federal driver's license, if you will, to be able to go into federal buildings, which affects a lot of USCIS offices. So that's been extended. There's also a update to the false claim of citizenship and the policy manual. And actually, they decided to take the adjudicator's field manual off the USCIS.gov website. So you're gonna have to use what's called the Wayback Machine. It's a thing online to try to catch the old adjudicator's field manual AFM notes to help you. They're going by the policy manual only, or are they showing that? But the policy manual that they have is not complete. There's huge gaps in it. So it's really unfair that they're doing that. The adjudicator's field manual is a great resource to try to figure this stuff out. There's been huge litigation in the H-1B sphere. There are a lot of successes causing them to rethink how they're analyzing H-1B. A Washington State decision was really good. I think I did an interview with somebody where we talked about that, broke that down. And also because of the effects on the food supply, I think it's H-2A, the farm worker programs have been loosened up too, so people can come and go. So that's interesting. Now, on the other end, there's all sorts of travel bans that are popping up for the credit virus, coronavirus, which probably end up being a credit virus too. And the messed up part about that is they're saying, some embassies are saying the K-1 visa is going to be included in this travel ban. So this travel ban says that if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you're exempt. But if you have an immigrant visa after this certain date, then you're not exempt. But also, let's see, if you're from Europe, you can't come and stuff like that. But what about the K-1 fiancé visa? That's a hybrid, immigrant, non-immigrant visa. One European embassy at least said, no, we're considering that not applicable or not waivable because they're not married to a U.S. citizen, so they're subject to that travel ban for Europe. So this is weird stuff that's happening. Let's see. The BIA says firm resettlement. Okay, so this is something that pops up. Just keep in mind. So when you're doing an asylum case, firm resettlement is if you have the ability to be somewhere else rather than the U.S., well, you got to go there. And I think that applies for TPS too, though sometimes they don't pay attention to it. But there's a quote here that says, for purposes of determining whether an alien is subject to the firm resettlement bar to asylum, a viable and available offer to apply for permanent residence in a country of refuge is not negated by the alien's unwillingness or reluctance to satisfy the terms for acceptance. So if they come at you and say, well, you could get a green card somewhere else, that could be a problem. The BIA affirmed that. So be wary of that. If F1 student visa, Form I-20s can be emailed now. So typically, the applicant has to bring an original with them when they're processing it, come from overseas. But they could email them now because of the difficulties of mail and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they were saying coronavirus, you touch a piece of paper that someone else touched, you can get it. Now, CDC is saying, actually, that's not the case. You don't need to watch every little thing that comes into your house. That's craziness. DHS announces flexibility and requirements related to I-9 compliance, so that's good. I think it was like less original documents, you send photos, something like that. But go to the I-9 compliance website, it has that. USCIS announces temporary suspension of premium processing for all I-129, I-140 petitions. That sucks. USCIS announces flexibility in submitting required signatures. So this is really cool. Typically, you have to have original signatures for some applications. If you read the instructions, a lot of them let you do photocopies of ink signatures, but they're saying you could do it for all of the applications. You could do ink signatures and send a copy, but remember, you can't use digital copies of signatures. I mean, you can't be one of those computer, written stuff. It has to be hand wrote it with the ink, and then you copy it or took a photo of it. That's what they'll accept, and hopefully that becomes commonplace. And then keep in mind, E2s get FDNS site visits too. That's been happening a lot in Chicago. Just be mindful of that. And then the old memo, so this goes back to the H-1B litigation. USCIS is saying the old Neufeld memo used to deny H-1Bs is being taken out. I think this was the one for third-party site kind of stuff, but you can look that up. And then USCIS launches new online form for reporting fraud. So that's just, this whole time is spent on like really small amount of cases instead of helping move things forward. And this is pretty much why they're going bankrupt and they need a bailout, unfortunately. Senator letter. So, okay, before we move on to the next, this is the last one for USCIS I'm talking about. So 4 senators sent a letter to the president saying we should stop non-immigrant visas, temporary worker visas, because we have high unemployment. And these are the same group that when unemployment is low saying we should ban the same stuff too. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. They're going to stick with their arguments. But then in the letter, they also say we should get rid of the EB-5 program while we're at it. And the EB-5 program is a direct job creation program. So it's just what's going on, So one thing I'm trying to do a little bit different than before is have some clips of some interesting interviews I had, because I post these on YouTube and on the Facebook pages. So I do a lot of full interviews, and I don't even post all of them on the podcast series. But I'm going to have some sound bites of some key parts of some interviews I want to share with you, so you have that info. So we're going to jump into the first one right here. Talk about USCIS. And one problem I've been having with them is the online system for uploading for N400 and stuff. So I was talking with a colleague, and she was telling me, Nina Dutta, and she was telling me that how she handles it. She likes to do online filing as much as possible. Not me. I don't like to do online filing, but she does uploading. So some talking points there of how to deal with the issues that happen when you're dealing with the USCIS online filing upload kind of system. So I'll start right here.
I've always been a huge proponent of electronic filing whenever you can. I started doing N400 electronic filing. They do not make it easy, for sure, but it is an available tool. And I know that during some district director meetings, they've very heavily pushed and said, we prefer that. So, you know, wherever we can. We'll
figure it out. Like I've tried filing it, and then like they have one part. Maybe you can help me with this. So at first, I do the work, and then it says print out the sheet and sign it, and then give it to your client to upload it. But then I can't move forward until I upload it myself. So is that a glitch in the way they wrote it? How do you?
Yeah, I mean, just like those well-written forms, there's so usually you can email it to the client, and I have a little tiny scanner at home that I can do that with. But you can also now, you know, there are various things that we can use, right? You can take a picture with your phone, it turns it into a scan, and the client doesn't actually have to upload that.
Like they send it back to us and we upload it. But the way I keep reading it, it says like they have to upload it, or maybe I'm misreading it, so it always confuses me.
No. It's written pretty poorly. So you have to send it to them, and it's only a one-way signed G28 as well, other than the electronic signing. But it's don't worry about that. You know, print it, and it's so I'll give you I don't know if I should. I'll give you a hint. It actually looks the same. It doesn't have the client's A number. It doesn't have
it's a general thing. Yes, I'm confirming.
Yes.
What about the part where it asks for, because to move forward in one part, you have to, the client has to have like an online number, USCIS number. Do you have a create one at first? And my clients, when they do, they can't find it.
Yeah, that's another weird glitch, because even if the client has already created their account, you don't get a number generated until you file a case. So really, they created this form thinking that someone will have already filed like an I-90 or something with a number. So some of those you have to just put like 0, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They'll go through. Okay. That's another, I hit a wall. I'm like, then I have client make it, and I'm like, find your number. Like, I can't find it. I'm like,
No, they can't find their number. Yeah, no. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, it took trial and error. But yeah, unless they've actually gone through a case, they won't have the number. Yeah. It's, I'd love to talk to the tech people.
it's been there for a while too. You think they'd adjust it by now? So those things that help me up, or I hit a wall, I'm like, I'll just go back to paper. This is I don't know what's going on. It actually, I did an N336 case for a denied NATS, and because they had a number, I was about to send it. But then like this is the main one. When I was reviewing what the final format of the N336 looked like, there's a bunch of missing information. Like the boxes were unchecked. They didn't have my name on some stuff. And I'm like, I put it in there, but the sample copy they give us was missing information. And I'm like, I don't want to send this in, have it returned or something like that. So I ended up just like redoing the work on paper, mailed it in. And we had also done a service motion reopen because the error was so egregious by USCIS that they should have fixed it. And then while the N36 was in the mail to arrive to USCIS, they corrected it and they approved the case. So then I canceled the check. And so I saved the client some money right there. So I was like, oh, good thing I didn't go online. But it's just like, it's just a mess. Moving on. It is. All the frustrations at the end of it. All right. So that was interesting. I got to learn something new. That's always my favorite thing, is I like learning new things. So let's move on to Department of State. NBC sending info before I-130 approval notices. So we're seeing this, that the USCIS has not notified us that the I-130 has been approved. But all of a sudden, we're getting the welcome letter from NBC, which means they're approving the letters, not notifying us, sending the file, and then we're getting notification afterwards. So it's a weird situation. Or I have cases where the day I get the approval notice for I-130, a day later I get the embassy notification, where it's like, dude, usually this would take 2 to 3 weeks or 3 months sometimes. Now, the frustrating is not that I'm not grateful that things are moving faster, although when you expect that time to be there, it's kind of needed to help prepare stuff NBC face to avoid delay. But put that aside, I still have cases that take 1, 2, 3 months for the National Visa Center to contact us. So it's just inconsistent handling of these things that's really weird. The NBC apparently is doing furloughs or something like that. And if you notice, for the NBC communication, you can't email them anymore, but they have the website for Contact Us. And there it says that because they're overwhelmed or something, they're only handling emergency inquiries or requests. So that's what's happening there. There's a general suspension of routine visa services that are happening for U.S. embassies and consulates because of the coronavirus, and that's a main issue that we're all dealing with right now because things are stuck. And every day I'm getting calls. How long is this going to take? When are they going to open up? And it's like, well, I don't know. That's anyone's guess of what's going to happen there. Now, one weird thing was the Department of State, they tweeted something that essentially said, if you're a doctor, come, we'll give you a visa. And then a lot of people start calling and say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm going to get a visa. And DOS had to backtrack it and kind of see if you already had a case pending, let us know, we might process it sooner. Not just anyone doing it, but that just shows the lack of attention to detail when they're doing this. And then another thing with DOS is be prepared for passport issuance issue. This is for clients that already have, just naturalized and they want to get a passport. They're understaffed too, so there's dramatically longer wait times if you're going to request a passport. Now, one thing that's happening with the coronavirus breakdowns and all the things that have happened is that visa demand use actually has gone down. So they're not issuing visas. So when you think about China, you have all these consular processing cases that can't move forward. So China's visa bulletin charge is kind of standing still because it's not moving forward. Those visa numbers aren't being used. So we're going to see this year probably a bunch of unused visas. Now, it might go to other categories. I doubt it, but and so that's just going to prolong the expected timeline it would have taken for a Chinese or an Indian case or something like that to be able to reach where it needs to go to move things forward. So the DS stuff, the DOS stuff is not fun. But there's a lot of other stuff. I think it's newer. It's probably in May. The stuff I'll leave it for the next agency podcast. But Department of State is always just always difficult to deal with because of how fast things move, lack of proper communication, changes they do. But that's the situation with that. The clients are stuck outside. The loved ones are there. If you're employment based, you're stuck. They're not even going to do interviews because of that travel ban. Once they do open up, if that travel ban is extended, there's a 60-day travel ban President Trump started, minimum 60 days. So that's that. So that's DOS. Now I wanted to talking about those clips and stuff. I want to jump to a clip I did for an interview with the gentleman sorry, pronouncing right, but he calls himself the Price Whisperer, and he does analysis of how pricing should happen. So I have a clip here just for y'all to listen to about how to think about pricing when it comes to your cases and what kind of firm business plan you have. I thought it was an interesting piece of information for y'all to get in. So without further ado, we'll get that started.
And what we have found is that discounts, this is in general, discounts that are less than 10% are ineffective in driving sales. Discounts above 20% just makes you leave money on the table. Mm-hmm. So you rarely see a higher sales volume at, if you discount 30% or 40% compared to if you discount 20%, you just leave money on the table.
And what about the type of clients that associate with these prices? So if you do discount a lot, or if your prices are lower, what kind of effect does it have on the relationship you have with the customer?
Well, your price selects your customer. Mm-hmm. And any business want returning customers. I don't know if that's ever an issue for you, but I guess if you work for corporations that bring people in here, you want to have returning customers. But the price itself selects your customers, and there are always some customers who are price sensitive. There are always some customers who want greater service and are willing to pay more for that. It's two different business strategies. There's nothing wrong in focusing on price sensitive customers, but it's a very different business than focusing on sort of high expectation, high value customers. Mm-hmm. Now, just to give you an example, this is not law services, but a local business-to-business telco that's in the cloud. And we told them that they could quadruple their prices, which they did, not overnight, but over a period of like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Peter, the CEO, the result was twofold. First off, they increased sales with about 25% at quadrupled prices.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, because they now got a different set of customers, a set of customers that he characterized it as more professional.
Mm-hmm.
Their customer support cost went down with 80%, because these were customers who really understood the service that they provide. Whereas those price sensitive didn't even bother to understand the service, they just bought on low price.
Yeah. All right, I hope you enjoyed that one. So another interview I did was, this is behind a paywall actually for the Immigration Alert Toolbox, but with a colleague, Sam Malai. Now Sam is a business attorney, and he created what's called legal funnels, and he's trademarked that too. And so if you aren't familiar, there's this concept called funnels, or what is it called? There's a guy that wrote a book, Russell Brunson. He runs ClickFunnels, which is the go-to online digital sales program platform that's making it right now. Everyone knows about it. It's in this field. And Sam went and created the first major legal one, and we joined what's called the 7-figure club or something like that. It's when you make over $1 million doing a funnel system. And so I interviewed him for the premium subscribers of the Toolbox. But I have a clip here that he talks about the difference between a website and a funnel. And it's very important for people to understand, and I'm kind of in the same boat as he is, where I do not think websites are as important as they used to be. It does have the business card aspect of it, but to lead to as a lead generator or a lead controller that goes down your funnel to a sale, I don't think the way they're being done right now is as helpful. So I asked him straight up, what's the difference between a legal funnel and or a funnel and a website? He goes into it. More information is for premium members. Feel free to email me to get information on how to sign up. info@immigrationalertstoolbox.com. But I'm gonna have that clip come on so you can learn some more about what he's talking about.
I promise you, if you do it that way, and I do it my way, and I apply my funnel system to it, I'll be able to convert 5 to 10 times higher than you, just because I have a very systemized ways of taking these people that are interested in my service and getting them to actually sign up for my service.
There's two things. One is people got to differentiate a funnel from a website. Could you explain? Funnel's a different beast than a website.
Yeah. So basically, websites are dead. Websites will not get you clients. This is like a hard fact. The reason is because most people visit websites and they just leave because they're just checking out. Yeah, people just come in and leave. So instead, what you want to do is you want to send them to a funnel, and the first part of the funnel is usually a landing page. The first thing you always want to do is one of the fundamentals is grab their contact information early, as soon as you can, and that's sending them to a very specific, and it's when I explain landing pages, some lawyers will be like, "Oh, I heard a landing page," but no, there's just even a little bit. There's more to it. It's not just this very landing page. Even if I show you my landing pages, you probably wouldn't believe how they look like. But you want to get their contact information up front, and then next thing you want to do,
provide to get the contact information. Do you provide a product that says if you give your info, it's like this, or how do you kind of get them to give the contact info?
That's a misconception. Everybody talks about these lead magnets and guides you got to give. Nobody cares about guides and ebooks and things like that. That's not what it's about. I think usually when people start off, they spend hours and days trying to make that guide. At the end, you're promising a solution. So you're whatever you're giving away in exchange for the contact information is for you to solve their solution. So when it comes to immigration, it's like, hey, here's the 3 steps to getting your visa or getting your whatever that is. So that's what your landing page will say. It's not necessarily a guide. It's just pretty much it's a solution to their problem.
You enjoyed that one. The concept of funnels, I think, is the future. So you really got to think about how it works, and your website's design is your website's just your phone. Everything is designed to lead a person to do that consultation to then close a sale when it comes to the business of immigration law. So I'm going to talk a little about CBP, not much. The visa waiver program is something that a lot of people use, and they were in the U.S. when the coronavirus situation happened. A lot of people are stuck. They didn't want to get on a plane, or their flights are canceled. But if they overstay that 90 days, they're immediately an overstay, and that creates problems. Now, there is a thing called, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it right now. But this is when you want to get a 30-day extension of the visa waiver program. Maybe you get an additional 30 days after that. They've shown some flexibility in that. So you can do it in two ways. One is with USCIS. I think you schedule an info pass and you go and they give it, the director does, or the USCIS office, or CBP could do it too. But different offices are handling differently. Some say you got to come and contact us when there's 5 days left before your trip, and you have to show us proof that there are no other flights, or your flight was canceled, all that kind of stuff. So it's not as easy going to do it. There's a procedure and process. So be prepared for that. But if you get a visa waiver person contacting you, then you got to do it. Now, one thing that's happened with these travel bans and the coronavirus is that the southern border is essentially shut down. So only essential travel could come. Now, just a couple days ago, the Department of Homeland Security Director issued a statement of what essential travel is. The main thing is there's no tourist visa travel entering from land ports. Flights are okay, but when you come from not just Mexico, but from Canada, and they cite examples of workers who could come. If you have a work visa or a student visa, you can't come. For work visas, they just give the example of farm workers, but I would imagine a TN is the same thing, should be able to work, because it just says workers in that sense. And then there's exceptions for, I think, spouse of U.S. citizens. It's interesting, they're bifurcating. I mean, there's exceptions for U.S. citizens traveling, I think, and green card holders. But with regards to the other travel bans, a lot of times they're saying spouses of citizens are okay, but not spouses of green card holders or something like that. So be mindful, they're drawing this distinction that's really harsh that didn't used to be there. Every time, little bit by little bit, they're pushing us on different things to just take away what people can do. All right, so a quick note about the Champions for Freedom program. This is the program where I train people in marketing and handling immigration practices in the way I do, which is, a niche practice that just does good media, good marketing. And so it gets a lot of leads, which leads you to be able to just take the cases you want, charge a good price, and have a good lifestyle. If you can see like I've had the best months I've ever had in the last few months. Coronavirus hit, and all of a sudden, and I have different measurements of my analytics to see how things work. Google My Business, which you should all have accounts set up, every month sends me how it's going, and I had a list here of how it was, but on my mastermind call, I do a marketing mastermind as part of the Premium Toolbox program. I have the stats exactly, but since January to March, it kept getting cut 50%. I think in March, I only had one person click on my phone to call me from Google Maps and Google. Usually it's like 50 to 100. And so once I saw that, I'm like, I got to do something different. And I just updated. And if you look at my social media, you'll see I upped the level on a lot of levers I pull. And so it's April and May have been excellent months. And I have full income coming in June already stacked out for clients that are coming in. So the coronavirus not only not hit me, but it caused me to refocus my efforts on what works and what doesn't, and do even better and fine-tune my marketing methods. And I share this also in particular personal training in the Champions for Freedom program. So definitely, if you're interested in the mastermind call where I talk about in detail on this, which is a lower cost program, email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com to get information about that. There's also CLE type stuff I'm doing for L1s. I'm breaking down L1 cases really well for people who are interested in that. AO decisions. So if you don't have the time to read those hundreds of AO decisions, I read them for you and I put it out there so you can learn, both if you're new or if you're seasoned, doing it for 20 years. Every decision AO makes, even these unreported or major decisions, you learn about how their thought process is, so it's worth it. And also there's CLEs on competence. Now, CLEs are I'm California-based CLE, and about 15 to 20 states reciprocate, so it doesn't go the whole nation. But, even if you don't get the CLE credit, the information is really good there. In the Champions for Freedom program, I'm going to be announcing a special on it. I'm going to change some things in the programs. Probably next podcast I'll talk about it. But if you're interested, you're interested in immigration law, switching over, you're just starting, or if you just want to push the marketing next level, just send me an email. We'll set up and do an initial call to see what you need, what you don't need, if the program is appropriate for you, because it's not for everybody. But I want to see if it's something that's going to help you make a difference in your life. And my students are making it, man. I'm really happy to see what's going on. I'm going to start having them record testimonials so you can see exactly who our colleagues are who used it and how much it's helped. So that's going to be a fun thing. So I spoke about competence really shortly. I want to get into a segment I did with our colleague Ritu Goswami. Now, one thing is, this was recorded a while ago, and I posted it on YouTube, on Facebook. So it's going to be a reference to a time that passed. So the ABA had its mental health week for lawyers and the stress we deal with. So I did this segment. I was going to put this podcast together a month ago or weeks ago. I just got to it now. So the time reference is a little outdated, but I think it's really important. to kind of hear it out, and it references the CLE we did. So if you want to get access to that, if you're not a Toolbox Premium member, you could buy these individual kind of stuff and videos and watch them too, instead of just getting a package that's unlimited. But I'm going to tune that to Ritu. It was so good meeting her. She has her own website, has her own programs too that deals with mental health for lawyers and personal development and efficiency. So it's a really good person to know and to connect with. Follow her on Facebook and her videos. Because people are stressing right now, so it's a perfect time to have someone like this who's built up this history and experience of how to deal with these issues to help you go through it too. So without further ado, let me get that segment started. Hi everyone, I have a very special guest today, Ritu Goswami. I'd just done a great interview, a long form CLE with her we're going to talk about, but I definitely wanted to bring her on board today to talk about Lawyer Wellbeing Week, which the ABA announces this week. We're in the midst of it. And Ritu, you're an expert in this area, both being a productivity expert, which is focused on people just getting their mind and body right to focus on work, but also you're a great author. You already have 2 books under your belt, and you got a 3rd one that's going to be coming up. So you're a very patient person too, writing so much. Thank you for joining us. Could you let us know about what Lawyer Wellbeing Week is about?
Sure. So this week, May 4th through the 8th, 2020, is the first ever Lawyer Wellbeing Week. And this came out of a report that was released in 2017. I think it was called a Wellbeing Report, Lawyer Wellbeing Report. And it basically, that we already know this idea that lawyers are not doing well in their well-being, and we're not prioritizing well-being as a requirement for being good, ethical, competent lawyers. And so this week is to kind of bring attention to that. Every day is a different dimension of well-being, because it's all of us, all parts of us. And they have different activities going on. AILA, for those of you who are members of AILA, has activities going on this week. I led a roundtable yesterday. I'm launching things in my new billable hour community. And so, yeah, it's a chance to kind of, especially with what's going on, to kind of pay attention to our well-being, our holistic well-being, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, and just getting back into alignment with who we are as lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, with everything that's going on in the world today, between politics and the physical health and mental health gets hit with all that. It already was feeling that stress, and it's even worse right now. Even the financial stuff going on. Just getting this PPP loan has been a disaster, stressing people out. So it's good really to talk about it, let know everyone's experiencing this. You're not alone. You do a lot of work in this area. Could you talk quickly about what your new book, The Holistic Lawyer, is about?
Sure. So my first book is The New Billable Hour, and that is the entry and the community that I'm creating for lawyers about basically gaining control over our time. So it's the new billable hour, whether you bill by the hour or not. It's about billing yourself 1 hour per day for increased productivity and work-life balance. And the holistic lawyer is kind of like level 2. So that's like entry level. And it's, when you have a lot of these mindfulness practices down, I noticed that lawyers wanted more, or people would come to me like, oh, I already do that stuff. Like, I want more. So the holistic lawyer is how to use your whole brain to work smarter, not harder. And this book was just released in print in April, and the audio is going to come out soon. It's also available on ebook wherever you buy books.
Are you do the audio yourself?
Yes, I for both books. Yes.
Awesome.
I love to talk, and I don't want anyone else to. We were talking about control. I don't want anyone else to read my words. Yes, but I did record both. It was actually really fun.
Just for the viewers to know, we did record a CLE that's in California, at least it's a competent CLE. So it used to be drug abuse and mental health kind of stuff. And so that's going to be really helpful for people to take care of that requirement, but more importantly, the information on it. Just helpful to cope with the stuff that's going on to adjust. I want to thank you for coming on, and people that are members of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox will have access to that, and I'll make it probably open to other members for a certain period of time to access as well. Ritu, you have a community you're creating as well. Could you tell us about that community?
Sure. It's the New Billable Hour community, and there's a free library membership. I'm really excited about this library, and hopefully that very soon that CLE video will go into my library as well.
Okay.
And so it's an opportunity to basically get the book, get the new billable hour book, and in as PDF or audio, and a bunch of different videos of meditations and productivity hacks, my podcast, which talks about time management and productivity. And so the library is like the center of it. And then there's a paid membership too, where we have community calls, and we just had one today. Every Wednesday we have community calls. And the idea is for people who have worked with me, done the new billable hour program, people who are thinking about it, people who are doing it on their own, people who are reading the books, people who have not read the books and they're like, what is this? It's creating a community of a new way of lawyering. And we know that as lawyers, we can tend to be competitive, and kind of don't want to be vulnerable and show who we are. So this is an opportunity to kind of show up, say what we're doing for ourselves, and network and create like a new way of working with each other. And so I'm really, really excited about this, that as it builds, we'll do like more like breakout groups and exercises. The theme of every week is related to the podcast. So there's continuity. This month, the theme is when things fall apart. Because what I'm gathering is, as lawyers, we want to be in control, and we are like, we really want to be organized, and we want procedures, and everything, like the rug was pulled out from us. And people are really suffering. I think even more than we're seeing, kind of like more than people want to admit. And so this idea of what can we let go of, which is the hardest thing I think for a lawyer, what can we let go of and let fall apart, right? And June, spoiler alert, is going to be about renewing and rebuilding. But we can't really rebuild. I think lawyers on this fast mode, like I need to have everything new and fixed and for when I reopen and all that stuff. There's a stage for our well-being and our health that we have to grieve, and we have to let go of how things were. And this is in the spiritual communities and the wellness communities, we're talking about it a lot, but not so much in the legal communities. So anyway, so the membership is that it's access to me. There's an online forum. I'm trying to get people off of social media and have a secure place, because social media is not secure really to discuss things. So the online forum is a place to talk about how you're doing with your mindfulness, what's coming up, so to create support. So that was just launched this week for Lawyer Wellbeing Week. You can go to my website, newbillablehour.com, to sign up for the free membership and upgrade to the paid membership.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about that.
Good stuff. We're going to be definitely doing more of these CLEs and other just information to help everyone in the community out. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thank you.
So in line with dealing with stress, the next segment's about ICE. And it's not much, but I had some things I wanted to read. There was a quick Q&A session, I think it was at the Nevada chapter, that was interesting. It said, if ICE is going to give extensions for those with voluntary departure now that the border is closed, or is ICE? And that person had a client was granted 60 full days to voluntary departure, but his date is coming up. How could they get extension? And the answer was from ICE apparently, as always, each situation will be addressed on a case-by-case basis. ICE policy has always been to automatically extend periods of voluntary departure when the cause for delay is at no fault of the alien. The policy continues to the current situation. And the second question was, orders of supervision and reporting requirements, are clients still required to report in person? Are there exceptions being made on a case-by-case basis? Some attorneys have reported that their clients are told not to appear in person and say they've been instructed to report by telephone. Does this apply to everyone or only certain clients? And the response was, any individual with a scheduled appearance on an order of supervision are being contacted to make a new reporting date. If the individual has not been contacted by the non-detained case officer, please instruct them to contact the non-detained unit for further instruction. That's 702, I guess is the local number there. If none of these arrangements are made, an individual appears at the ICE office, the person's contact information will be collected and given to the case officer for new arrangements to be made. So just, if you have these ICE cases where they have to appear, contact them and look into it. Now, the next thing that's popping up, we're going to courts just to finish it off. And, I have here in my notes in red, asked this court case that came down. There's two court cases that came down. But one is the issue with cancellation or removal and when it can start counting and when it doesn't. And so, because I don't handle court at all, I went to an expert, and I'm going to actually put the recording on how she explains the situation. You should listen to the full recording because she goes into some interesting stuff like cancellation removal, the history of it, all that kind of stuff. But she breaks down what happened. So I'm gonna go to that segment and then come back and talk some more about the court system.
I think Barton is incredibly important for all of your listeners, because although you might think that this is a technical issue in removal defense and the only people who need to understand this case are people who do removal defense, it's in fact extremely important for anybody who's filing any application with USCIS, including an application to change your status, adjust your status, or seek naturalization, because any contact with USCIS has the potential to put somebody in removal proceedings, because the grounds of potential removability are vast.
Yeah.
And they're in a sense designed to be vast. And the safety valve for being subject to removal has always been that you can seek cancellation of removal, or I should say it's always been since 1996. Before 1996, there was a form of relief called 212C relief for permanent residents, and a more generous form of suspension of deportation for people who were not permanent residents. So Barton is huge in terms of closing off access to relief in a removal hearing if a client happens to wind up in removal, which could happen for anybody. Anybody could wind up in removal. And what Barton says is that the requirements for cancellation of removal, which, so for permanent residents, those requirements are permanent residency for 5 years, continuous legal presence for 7 years, and no aggravated felony conviction. So in those requirements are, what the Barton case does is it takes the part of that, which is continuous legal residence of 7 years, and creates a new bar by the way it interprets conditions that can stop continuous residence. So this sounds super, super technical, but the reason it matters is a lot of people begin their legal residency in the United States when they're, 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, whatever, and incur some relatively minor criminal problem when they're 18 or 19 or whatever. It could be violating a marijuana law. It could be, a petty theft. It could be a turnstile jump. It could be all kinds of things. And what this decision says is that those things that happen in the first 7 years have huge importance down the line. It doesn't matter if the person's put in removal proceedings 4 decades after coming here. Mm-hmm. The clock for cancellation of removal can stop in those first 7 years for reasons that would not have even made the person deportable. And that's what the decision does. It is enormous. Mm-hmm. And probably the best example of how enormous it is drug offenses, because drug offenses for inadmissibility, anybody who practices immigration law knows that for inadmissibility, it's any violation of a regulation or statute here or abroad, which is either an admission, which is a technical term. There are certain things that are required for somebody to admit to a crime, or a conviction is a bar to admissibility. Whereas is a ground of inadmissibility, I should say. And you might seek a waiver or whatever, but it's a ground of inadmissibility. Whereas for deportability, Congress very intentionally in the 80s put in exceptions. And one of the exceptions is that if you have a first offense, meaning conviction of possession of marijuana of less than 30 grams, that's not a ground of deportability. And generally, deportability requires a conviction. It doesn't just require conduct and an admission. Mm-hmm. So what Barton does is it allows the inadmissibility grounds, which are really broad and could be lots of people who've gone on to have exemplary lives. It allows those things that happened in the early years to cut off access to a relief hearing. So it's a horrible, horrible decision. And, just in terms of the result and what it means for immigration practice and what the threat is to the millions of people in the United States who are permanent residents. It's also a threat to people who are not permanent residents, who might be seeking non-LPR cancellation. So it's a threat to all of those people, but it is most shocking. It's most shocking in its effect on permanent residents because of the long history of immigration law, which has been, has not been easy on permanent residents, but has made sure through decades and decades of history that there is an available method of relief before an immigration court.
Another thing about the Supreme Court, they made a decision, which I was surprised, where they said, well, you know what, I'll actually go back to another segment from what the professor talked about and just recap it there, because I think I do a better job there. So tune in.
The Supreme Court is making some wild decisions. I won't go into this, but the recent one where they said the Ninth Circuit, they undid the Ninth Circuit decision about the free speech and be able to talk about immigration and options that they have. And one justice's idea that the overbreadth doctrine for First Amendment maybe should be done away with. It's kind of shocking seeing that this kind of stuff coming. It's kind of law school con law kind of stuff coming back, but I was really surprised to hear this kind of stuff. But it's very disappointing. We'll see what happens. Sometimes in the darkest night, that's when the sun comes out.
Well, I think that when the courts become very bad, that's when the need for Congress to act is greater. It's when the need for people to mobilize politically around the issues becomes more important. So there is some balance there. But in the meantime, there are going to be a lot of very tragic stories coming out as a result of this decision. But just picking up on that case you were referring to, United States versus Sinning-Smith, the Supreme Court, was outraged that the Ninth Circuit had reached out and decided an issue that was not in front of it. Mm-hmm. And it said, well, that was a terrible thing to do. And what was odd in that opinion is that nobody had argued that in front of the Supreme Court. So they just reached out themselves to do what they did. But if you look at the Barton case, the entire logic of the Barton case is built around a concept that wasn't in the legislative history. It wasn't in the briefs. It wasn't in the oral arguments.
Yeah.
And so they created a justification. They interpreted the law in a very, very harsh way that I think was a disingenuous reading of the statute, and then justified it with a policy idea that was not anywhere in the legislative history. It was just the policy of the Supreme Court, which is exactly what the conservative wing of the court is supposed to be opposed to.
Exactly. It really delegitimizes the court by this kind of hypocrisy, and it just, their whole history is them of just picking up arguments that weren't in the original briefs. You see this all the time. So just when I woke up in the morning and I got a bulletin that this case was decided negatively, I'm like, oh, this is an easy case. Of course they're going to approve the Ninth Circuit. Then I saw the reasoning. I'm just like, just baffled. Like, this doesn't make sense anymore. It's kind of up is down, down is up. So it's that kind of stuff is just really frustrating as an attorney and really as an American.
So those are our thoughts on Supreme Court decisions. We're still waiting on what happens with DACA. Probably not going to be good news, but we'll see what happens. Now, the BIA decided to add 2 members, so they've been expanding to 23. EOIR also established a temporary email account system where people could email stuff over. Just be prepared, there's deadlines in there. Maybe if you send something by email, the email isn't going to set down in time, so it breaks, goes past the deadline. Be really watchful of that. Another thing that's happening is the First Circuit District Court of Massachusetts says TPS is admission for adjustment of status. Hat tip to Dan Kowalski put this out there. So there's always this issue: is TPS automatically admission or not? Ninth Circuit says it is. There's another circuit that does. First Circuit was added to that. At least the District Court of Massachusetts said so. So we'll see what happens. But one thing that's popping up is some USCIS offices are not accepting a person. Let's say it's one of those circuit jurisdictions that don't accept TPS as admission. Well, if you have TPS, you could get advanced parole. And once you get advanced parole, you come back into the United States. Okay, you have parole. You're 245A, capable of adjusting. Some USCIS offices don't accept that advanced parole. They say when you return, you revert back to the status you had before. And if it was unlawful status or something like that, you can't adjust status. So be mindful. Know what your local USCIS office does and considers TPS for adjustment purposes, because you get a denial that's unexpected. Another thing is to update your client intake questionnaires. The Seventh Circuit said a lawyer should affirmatively ask if applicants have been witnesses or victims to crime for U visa. So in that case, the lawyer should have noted that the person was a U visa candidate but didn't, and that could be problematic for us. So you kind of ask, have you been a witness or victim to crime, all the U visa kind of stuff, S visa maybe, so you could bring it out if it is, to highlight that this is possible. I always orally ask clients, but I think it's some option to check my intakes actually. But that's really important to ask in there, so you have it on the record, so client doesn't come back later and say, well, I had a U visa case, but you didn't talk with me about it, and that could be a hassle for, just, what I'm talking about. All right, case of... there was another case, I don't have good details on it, but it was really interesting. Actually, I'm going to probably do a full podcast on this. But apparently they're saying some attorney didn't file a case properly, and because they didn't, that was excused absence. So when you're filing for adjustment of status, you have to be in lawful status unless there's a reason that's out of your control that's stopping it. A lot of times people, I'm going to analyze in that new podcast I'm going to do in a bit. But like if you have, you file for asylum, you come on a tourist visa, you file for asylum while the asylum is pending, you file for adjustment of status. At that point, you no longer have the underlying status to be able to adjust. But because some courts are saying there's a BIA case, matter of TK or something like that says when you have asylum, because you're waiting on a decision from USCIS, the delay is out of your control, that existing status continues or something like that. They're saying if a lawyer holds up a case and file properly, that could be a reason why you're still in status, and it's the lawyer's fault. So that's interesting to know. I'm going to get into more detail on that in another podcast. Okay, the Third Circuit on Wednesday tossed the Board of Immigration Appeals removal order for an Ecuadorian immigrant after finding that the board misread the so-called stop time rule and that the error was the sole reason the man's case was rejected. The panel said Guadalupe did not receive a statutorily complete notice to appear in immigration court as required by the 2018 U.S. Supreme Court Pereira v. Sessions. So that's being fought out even more. Another case says the 5-4 ruling with the court's conservative justices in the majority overturned a 2017 Kansas Supreme Court decision that had voided the convictions of 3 restaurant workers for fraudulently using other people's social security numbers. So the court said in that case the social security number is an issue. So could we have it pop up? You got to read the court decisions for this. I'm not going to go too much into it. But whether our clients use false social security numbers, is that problematic for adjustment or not? It's always a scary thing, and different people are dealing with it differently. Didn't look good in Kansas right there. Okay, so I want to end this with 2 things. One is, after this, I'll just end it with this, just in case people don't want to listen, don't have to, but they've updated the way the LSAT's working. Now, a lot of us already took the LSAT and we're already lawyers, but it's interesting. They're changing the system for the LSAT that I thought was neat. So I'm going to have a video recording with an LSAT training expert that talks about what those changes are after I go through these LPR statistics that I thought would be interesting that was published. So approximately 1,031,000 foreign nationals obtained lawful permanent residence in fiscal year 2019. Let's see, and then for same in 2019. Sorry, it's a repeat of the sentences. Of these admissions, 572,000 adjusted status from within the United States, and 459,000 entered as new arrivals. Compared to fiscal year 2018, total fiscal year 2019 admissions decreased by 6%. So it's almost half and half, if not 60-40 as adjustment to consular processing. Total decrease of 6%. New arrivals decreased by 13%. So more obviously consular processing, travel bans and stuff is going to be less people. Adjustment status increased by 0.8%. Okay, I'm not sure how that works out, but okay. Countries of origin in fiscal year 2019, 39% of new LPRs were from 6 top countries of nationality: Mexico, China, mainland China, India, the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, and Cuba. In FY 2018, the top 6 countries are Mexico, Cuba, China, India, Dominican Republic, Philippines, same stuff. Represented 42% of new LPRs. Let's see, classes and modes of admission in 2019. 49% of new LPRs obtain status as immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, followed by additional 20% who obtain status under a family-based preference category. Employment-based preferences and refugees were third and fourth largest classes of admission, accounting for 14 and 7.9% of new LPRs respectively. So if you're doing business, my business plan is the biggest group, 49% are immediate relatives. My primary thing is adjusting status for immediate relatives. So we see here adjustment of status is bigger numbers. Actually, consular processing is there too. I actually charge more for consular processing because it's more of a headache than adjustment of status. But I think the bulk of my work is adjustment of status, immediate relative kind of cases. And it shows here as the stats of the biggest group that's happening. So just, I thought the information was neat. It may help you to retarget what you're doing. I just thought I'd throw it out there. With that, let me go to this interview. Again, thanks everyone for joining, listening. I hope this new method of having these little tidbits of interviews and segments with other people will be interesting and nice. And let me know how it goes. Please contact me for listening. Let me know you're listening. Could be good to connect with you on LinkedIn. I have a mail list where I have tidbits of information every week. I send a tips, not just one tip, usually 5 or 6 video tips of a practice area, some law information. I think it's really helpful for a lot of people. So especially if you're new, but if you're older, there's new things that are happening. Just email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. The list is for lawyers, so if you are do that. If you're a paralegal listening, I'm creating a separate list for paralegals, so you can email me as well. Please do to get this information so you get the most up-to-date information, a lot of helpful tips, a lot of information like that. And if you're interested in the Champions for Freedom program, please email me as well to that training. The marketing training is really important. You should be thriving right now and not being affected by the coronavirus. A lot of what we do could be done by mail and email. It's the best thing to have a business where you just be at home and make money. And so I really want to teach you how to do that if you're interested, if you got the ambition and the go-gettingness to do it. All right. There's probably some more stuff to talk about. Follow, on LinkedIn and Facebook. But with that, let me go to this segment. I wish you all a happy time and a healthy time and hope to see you all and talk with you all soon. God bless. I'm talking with Steve Schwartz. He's an expert on the LSAT test, which is kind of redundant. You can't say LSAT test, but I did a podcast with him a while ago, which is great. And I have a lot of listeners who are college students interested in going to law school. So I find these segments really important, and especially in light of the coronavirus and the changes that are happening to the LSAT exam. I wanted to ask you, what is going on? I know a lot of lawyers went through this. They're interested too. What are the changes that are happening, Steve, to the LSAT program?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. And thanks for having me. So the biggest change is that the LSAT has gone online because of COVID-19, not possible to administer it in person, of course, in large gatherings. So they've moved it to an online format. Students are taking it at home from their own computers. And most notably, the exam has been shortened to 3 sections, not 5, specifically for the online format.
So what sections are being taken out?
Well, they're not including the experimental section anymore. And they're also including only 1 logical reasoning rather than 2, as on the previous exam. So now it's 1 games, 1 reasoning, 1 reading comp.
Does it mean it's harder, easier, or it's still the same? What is your takeaway or your thoughts? I mean, it's hard to know. It hasn't happened yet.
Well, the question difficulty is the same. The section difficulty is the same. I think it's an easier experience to do it at home in the comfort of your own environment, not having to go somewhere or be around other people who might distract you. And also just having a shorter test day experience. You're done in 2 hours.
Wow. And I mean, how do they avoid cheating and stuff like that?
So they're using a company called ProctorU, which also does the GRE, the GMAT, high school advanced placement exams. And they monitor students with a webcam and a microphone, and they record all of it for later review if necessary. And they also use AI to track even your eye movements.
Damn.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's interesting, but yeah, that's how they kind of look for anything suspicious.
Okay, so how are you adjusting your training with this scenario that's popping up for these students that are interested in this?
Well, basically, I'm preparing students for the test day experience specifically. So we're not worrying about distractions of other test takers in some unfamiliar environment. We're instead making sure that you've got a comfortable, quiet environment at home. So your friends, your family, your roommates, your dog, nobody's going to interrupt you for those 2 hours. You can just progress smoothly and hopefully be done with no hiccups in the span of those 2 hours. Another big thing is also getting ready for the different length. So endurance is less of a factor because it's 3 sections, not 5. At the same time, though, each question does matter more because you're only doing about 75 questions rather than about 100 scored questions. So no time to get warmed up. You've got to be ready to go. The second section one starts, the second question one starts. So do some warm-ups before you actually start. And I recommended that even before, but now it's especially important because every question matters just a little bit more now.
It's interesting. You said, I think it's gonna be a big issue having a quiet environment where you don't have family coming in. It's going to affect people. The whole socioeconomic standard becomes a problem because everyone's in the house right now because of the lockdown. And if you don't have a multi-room house, that becomes a problem of like, where are you going to go? Sit in the bathroom and do it. So there's a comfort level and like, that's going to affect some people, but there's always changes. There's always something going on in the world. How are your students coping with that? Are you stressed out, or what's the mood like?
I think most of my students feel pretty good about it because they like the idea of a shorter exam. They like the idea of not having to go anywhere. I think it becomes more difficult for students who might not have a suitable device. Like if they only have a tablet or only have a phone, those aren't going to work. Or if you have shaky internet. And in those cases, LSAC will actually work with you to provide you with a loaner device and maybe even a specific location to take it in a pretty small group setting. But yeah, it is harder.
Speaking of home problems, my kid just ran in the middle of the scene. So hopefully these kind of problems won't happen to test takers and the AI won't get them. But I guess that's the reality of it. How are you yourself dealing with life? You're in New York, right?
Yeah, I'm in New York.
How's life in New York? I mean, luckily you have a digital online work environment and which people need, so it's not like they could necessarily shut it off. So you got a kind of a good position. I'm assuming you have a relatively good position relative to a lot of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing pretty much everything online anyway. Any in-person classes I was going to be doing, I've transitioned those to online instead, and I've made sure to have a strong internet connection anyway. So things work pretty smoothly for me. Like anybody else, I've got family at home, kids at home, potential interruptions, and so you have to make sure that anytime you have anything really important, like a conference call or something, or especially the LSAT, you got to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to make sure that other people won't interrupt you during that time.
Now, let's take the business angle. What do you do to have a more reliable internet connection?
Well, biggest thing I would say is use Ethernet. So most people, of course, rely on Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is good enough for most internet activity. Even streaming videos, Wi-Fi is good enough. Obviously, we've all been on like Skype calls or Zoom calls where things go in and out or flicker a little bit. And if you can have a plugged-in Ethernet wired connection, like one of those old phone jacks, like you plug that into your computer if your computer even allows it. Otherwise, you might need an adapter of some kind. But a wired connection is always going to be a lot stronger than a Wi-Fi connection. So I would encourage anybody to get a wired connection if possible. Obviously, during the current lockdown, that might be difficult to even get somebody to come install that. But if you could order a wire and just connect to your router or connect to your modem, that'll give you more reliability. And if this happens on the LSAT Flex, that there's a flicker for a second, that's totally fine. They'll save your work and you can pick up where you left off. But if it was a big outage, I would imagine that would invalidate the test due to security.
Yeah. And another thing is, my internet provider, I have a regular home internet. I've been using it even though I work from home. But they send me flyers that say if you get the business version of the internet's more expensive, you get better service and like all this kind of stuff. I've always debated whether it's worth it to buy like the extra level of internet connection from the local cable provider. But so far, are you using the typical home base, or did you have like a commercial line?
Well, once I started doing a lot of videos, a lot of online classes, a lot of recording like this, I actually did upgrade to a gigabit connection. And it is a little bit more expensive, but to me, it was worth it because I'm constantly doing webinars and recorded calls like this, and you never know what the other person's going to have. And so I at least want mine to be as good as possible. And since I'm doing like at least 1 or 2 full days a week, I'm doing nothing but recordings like this. And I'm often doing classes in the evening and I'm recording them for later use. And I want my students to have a good experience as well. So I made that investment. It's a business expense, which is nice. And also it doesn't hurt that I get better Netflix and all that too. It's a nice bonus.
I'm going to look into it. I'm glad we talked because that's so important, because I do have these Zoom calls where sometimes it's on my end where it starts pausing, you can't hear them. And it's just a waste of time. It ruins the flow of things and ruins the user experience. So I'm going to look into this to see how they can handle it. That's good. Good point.
Yeah, especially if like you have family at home too, and like somebody else might be streaming something else. Like your kid is streaming a video on the tablet, and your significant other is also watching something or on a video call with their family. Too many people on video calls simultaneously or using video too much, it will diminish yours. And you don't want like your business conference call to be interrupted by your kid watching SpongeBob, right?
Yeah. And that's you said the scenario in my household. I just got to remember to lock the door next time, but that's it. Well, thank you so much, Steve. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. So again, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I also have a Facebook community and an Instagram of the same name, and I'll send you all the links.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll pop it in the show notes. Thanks, Lazi. Stick around after the call, but I appreciate it talking with us again.
Sure. Thanks, John.